linked, if you understand. Am I where you want me? Okay. Uh, Ladies' Man. After my fateful year as a ninth grader, high school was destined to be a sorrowful anticlimax, at least so far as romance possibilities were concerned. I had, after all, just come off the excitement of 2 months at Mansfield Junior High in Tucson, where I experienced the thrill of love at first sight with Anne Marsh. Soft, straight, shoulder-length blonde hair, clear blue eyes, slim, long-legged figure, only to complete the year torn from her bosom, metaphorically speaking, back in my dull hometown in Oregon. Worse times followed. For 10th, 11th, and the 12th grades, I was enrolled as a cadet at Culver Military Academy in Indiana, an all-boys boarding school. It was so far away and travel so difficult during those war years that I could not go home for the week of vacation which we had at Thanksgiving and again at Easter. I did, luckily, have some place to go. My grandmother lived in Madison, Wisconsin, in a historic lakefront house which she had occupied alone for all the years since my grandfather's death. She welcomed my visits, and we spent several happy weeks together over those 3 years, seeing the sights of that capital city, including the university, dining in many fine restaurants, or just talking together in the parlor. On one such occasion, during spring break of my final year at Culver, I asked if she could somehow sew up the hole which had appeared in my pants pocket. Of course, she responded, snatching up her needle and thread. Don't even bother taking them off. Just stand over here, empty the pocket, and turn it inside out. I complied, and grandmother set to work. Her eyes strayed to the little pile of objects I had placed on the table. What's this, dear? She asked, picking up the small keychain holding the tag on which I had written the initials AM in blood. My secret lay exposed. I decided to level with her. I poured out the entire story of my totally unrequited ninth grade love, my devotion to her memory, my decision to carry the tag in my pocket forever. Promise you won't tell anyone, Gleely, I pleaded. Gleely was a pet name that we used for her. I dared a quick look in her direction. I was amazed at the expression on her face. For a brief moment it was as though she had seen a ghost. Then, very quickly, her lips parted in a warm smile. She seemed to be looking beyond me into the distance. Oh, Teddy, I can see it already. You're going to end up being a ladies' man, just like your great-grandfather Leopold. Leopold? I blurted out. Who's Leopold? My great-grandfather, your father, was named Darwin. Darwin Clark. Mother has told us about him since we were babies. Grandmother Gleely sat in silence for several minutes, sighing, looking fondly into my face from time to time. Suddenly she seemed to come to a decision. Bring the bottle of white wine from the icebox, Teddy, and 2 glasses. We're going to have a long talk right here, right now. I was only 17. I had never been invited to drink wine with an adult before, but I wasn't about to argue. I brought them. Gleely poured generously and began. I know that you've been told over and over about your ancestors, about my mother, Frances Adams, and her husband, Darwin Clark. In fact, here they are with me in this picture. She reached across the table, carefully lifted an antique frame, and passed it to me. I think I was about 14 when it was taken. I took it from her. It was not in color, of course. I had never seen pictures of Gleely as a young girl. I noticed her hair as it flowed softly over her shoulders. "What color was your hair?" I asked. "Blonde," she answered, "and silky." "And your eyes were?" "Of course, blue." But I had no need to ask more. Her slim, long-legged body was clearly apparent in the picture. In the silence which fell between us, I pondered the fact that every person in our family was dark-haired, brown-eyed. She resumed, "What your mother has never told you, because she has never known about it, is that Darwin Clark was not my real father. He met Frances Adams when she was already pregnant with me, and married her 1 month later. He met Frances Adams when she was already pregnant with me, and married her 1 month later. Nobody ever knew the difference, because they took an extended honeymoon in Europe. I was born in Geneva in the middle of that trip. By the time the three of us came back from Madison, I was 3 months old. So, wait a minute. You're saying that a man named Leopold was your real father? That your mother had some kind of an affair with him just before she met Darwin Clark? She couldn't marry Leopold, and Darwin was willing to take Frances and her unborn child. Really, it sounds like something I might see in the movies. Except, a mother wouldn't ever let me go to a movie like that. I held my glass out for a refill. What did Leopold look like? My mother told me that he had the most beautiful silky blonde hair to his shoulders, clear blue eyes, and a striking body, slim and long-legged. Good grief, I thought. If all this is true, and surely my grandmother would not be lying to me about it, then somewhere here in my own genes, waiting to be called forth, are the same soft blonde hair, blue eyes, slim, long-legged appearance that Anne has. Maybe we're fated to meet again sometime after all. Gleedy, did your mother tell you anything more about my great-grandfather, about Leopold? Just a little bit. We only talked about it one time when she and I were on a trip together to Geneva just after my college graduation. I guess the trip brought back those memories so strongly, she just had to share them with someone, and I was in the right spot at the right time. Leopold was brought up and lived in Heidelberg. He was a professor of chemistry at the university there. My mother was working for one summer month as an assistant in his lab. That's how they met, became lovers almost overnight, and conceived me. Leopold couldn't marry her. He already had a wife, and he was on the verge of becoming very famous. Famous for what, Gleely? Who was he? What was his last name? Bunsen, Teddy. Leopold Bunsen. You know, he invented the Bunsen burner, which is used all over the world in chemistry labs. You probably use one down there at Culver in your chemistry class. She was right. I was taking chemistry that very year. In fact, next week at this time, I would probably be standing right in that lab, perhaps lighting the flame on the burner. Somehow I knew that lab would never again be the same for me. nor would my grandmother.
Right.
Wow.
Do you want the linked part too?
Yeah.
The what part?
There's a second part.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. It's linked a little bit. It's a shorter part, and it has a separate title. It's called "It Must Be the Legs." All right, Ted. Dr. P will see you back in 2 weeks, and be sure you bring shorts so I can see your legs. Dr. P was my podiatrist, who would need to observe my gait with the new orthotics. Roxanne, his sharp-tongued receptionist, enjoyed telling the men patients how she liked to look at their legs. We all took pleasure in her sassiness. I, however, was probably the only one who wrote a poem for her. I called it Legs. Roxanne, I think, likes legs. Long legs, short legs, hairy legs, smooth legs, men's legs. Bring shorts, she says, so we can see them. Pretends it's the doctor who needs to pretends it's the doctor who needs to see them. They have a deal, I'll bet. On days when shorts are not called for, she seems just a little down, subdued, though still perky. She's like that. One day soon, Roxanne, give us all a break. Wear your shorts to work. Give the rest of us a thrill. I brought the poem to her at my next appointment. That was 7 years ago. I go back once a year for a checkup. Roxanne still makes her little joke about the legs. And I noticed on my most recent visit, she still has my poem tacked up on the wall just above her desk. About that same era, 7 years ago, I also wrote a poem for a classmate in the Tuesday morning poetry workshop, who was doing a poetry reading one Saturday night. Her name was Joan Fallard. Since I admired her poems, I resolved to go hear her.